start, he mentioned that there should be an independent audit of Chicago. I actually somewhat agree. I don't agree with the city's own CAFR reports, which are their main financial reports every year, but the problem with what he's saying is he's arguing that Chicago's not broke, but if we were actually to see an independent audit of those financial reports, it's actually going to be a lot worse. The ones that I've seen is actually, so I said $29 billion is what they claim to be in debt. I've seen reports showing as much as $61 billion, so almost twice as much debt than what's on the books that they're telling us. So I think that actually only makes the problem even worse and leads into my argument that we are broke and we do need to fix it. I agree with him on some of the things that he's trying to do in terms of the TIF districts. I agree, they are a big cronyism play. I wish you would have probably talked a little bit more about the cronyism giveaways like film tax credits and all these other subsidies that we throw out to corporations one-on-one basis rather than, I mean, if you're going to give a good tax treatment to someone, you should give it to everyone. You should give it to small businesses, large businesses, middle-sized businesses, entrepreneurs, and everyone else in between. He mentioned the transaction tax. Well, the problem with that is, you know, we have CMA Group here, we have the Board of Trade, and while, yes, they would probably, well, I would say that they do pay taxes. They don't pay it on the transaction, obviously, but they do pay taxes on the income that they earn and the businesses. So they are actually already a fairly major taxpayer in the city. And what you would do in a place like that is you would actually drive CME Group and the Board of Trade out of Chicago. The CEO just a couple of weeks ago has already said, you're saying bye-bye, but if you want a transaction tax, then you don't get the money from them. Do you want the money? So you don't want the money from them. Okay, well then we'll have even more debt. So then instead of the I don't know exactly how much money he said the transaction tax would take, well you can say bye-bye to the transaction tax money. So now you're going to have to pay down the 61.
Where would they go?
Do what?
You said they'd leave. Where would they go?
They can go anywhere.
Why don't they go to Texas right now then?
That's right.
Where do they go now?
That's right.
Well,
nothing keeps them here.
There's a significant amount of stockbrokers here. Their infrastructure is here, but if you make it completely
They can't get up and leave
here and do businesses, then they would leave. It would be the straw that makes the camel's back.
They could have done that 30 years ago.
Anytime.
They could have gone to Sunbelt 30 years ago. Why didn't they go to Sunbelt 30 years ago?
A lot of their stuff
taxes
is
were already low down there.
Actually, they do. I mean, they don't. If you go to the Board of Trade, there are not that many people actually trading on. I'm going to move on to the progressive income tax. 1 minute, okay. Real quick, the progressive income tax. As I mentioned, we already lost 3 million millionaires last year. As I said, if you want to increase revenues, if your most important thing is core services of government, if you want beautiful libraries like that we once have behind us, we need as many millionaires here in Chicago as we can get, because then they will be able to fund the stuff that we're trying to do through tax revenues and all these other things. So if you don't want millionaires, then you don't want the stuff like the libraries behind me. So
then why aren't they doing it now?
We are in a very precarious situation.
Then why aren't they doing it now?
We're not going to be able to fix Chicago's debt problem. Thank you.
How to share.
Okay, well let's get something straight right away. We're done taking care of the millionaires, okay?
That's right!
We are so done with that. They are well provided for.
That's right.
We've been taking care of the millionaires since the Chicago Plan in 1909 with a beautiful city. That is to say, the whole purpose of a city is to make millionaires comfortable. This is a trickle-down economy. It doesn't work, it hasn't worked, and it will not work. So let's get rid of that thought. So, LaSalle Street tax, it's the biggest idea in the book. According to our authors, it would generate $2.6 billion every year for the city of Chicago. Now, my colleague says that the exchanges will leave. They're not going to leave. They can't leave. It's outlined in the book. 1, co-location. So the servers that provide the trading tools for the sellers are located right next to the CME exchanges. It's a building the size of 7 football fields. Are they going to move that out of to go where? No, I don't think so.
No.
Also, liquidity. When people try to set up their own exchange, as they did in Atlanta some years ago, they don't have the mass, the volume, and so the liquidity is provided by all those players right here. So if one guy leaves, everything else is still here, all the other aspects of the industry. So no, it is not realistic for the exchanges to say they're going to bolt. But that's what they always do when they're threatened with paying a little more, don't they? They'll say, we're going to take our ball and go home. They're not going anywhere. All right, so these toxic deals have to be investigated. Right now, with the toxic swaps that the Board of Education has gotten into, they're open to a legal challenge for all the fees. That means termination payments and the profits. The mayor could challenge these fees, these usurious takings, as has been done in other cities, but he doesn't. You know why? Because he's an investment banker. He's an investment banker. So his buddies are getting fat on all these fees and swaps and toxic deals. They've got to be stopped. And so, in conclusion, my remarks for this part is just to say, let us really look at the LaSalle Street tax. It's not a silver bullet, but it's the damn closest thing we have to it to make this Chicago work for everybody.
You know, you don't have to take my word for the head of CME group said they'd leave. So
sure.
I don't think you're going to get the servers. You can move servers.
Say that.
The idea that you can't move servers to another location is ridiculous. CME group had moved here. Someone mentioned a national transaction tax. You know what? You can have that debate, but we're not debating that. We're debating a Chicago transaction, a financial transaction tax. And if that happened, there's no reason they would not leave. Actually, so go back. I want to go back to the high income tax, the progressive income tax that some people are talking about. I looked at all the different billionaires in Chicago who reside in Chicago. There's about 20 of them. I added up all their net worths, and it barely, just barely. So if you commandeered every single dollar that they own, billions and billions.
Nobody's saying that. No one says that.
No, it would still barely cover the amount of debt that Chicago has.
Reduce oil.
They won't be paying taxes every year. So without that, so you can commandeer every single dollar that they own.
And no one says that.
Deal with it.
Absurd.
That companies won't leave because of tax reasons. Look to no further than our next door in Indiana. Since in the last 8 years, 53 different companies have moved just from Illinois and Chicago to Indiana. That's just Indiana. I'm not even bringing in Wisconsin or Texas or Florida or the other states. So we are losing residents, hard-working residents. We are losing startups. We are losing other companies that are well-established, especially the entrepreneurs. If you build up a company and you get to a certain point where maybe you go from a $1 million company to a $5 million or a $10 million company, maybe you'd be like, you know what, we're just small enough to where we really don't have roots here in Chicago, but man, I was kind of successful, so now I'm going to leave because I just can't deal with all this debt because I know $61 billion in debt, what that means is future tax increases. That's what that means unless they start to look at actually looking at the unfunded liabilities, the long-term tax debt that we have on the books, the $61 billion, the $63,000 per person debt burden that each household here has. That is how much is hanging over your neck right now. And that, like I said, the median income in Chicago is less than that. So we have to look at this in a serious way, and like I said, I commend him for his work on TIF districts. They are a horrible thing, but it's a small amount of revenue. It's $400 million a year. Let's get rid of them. I agree, but that's not going to get you anywhere. And this financial tax, there's no way it brings in $2.6 billion, and it's going to drive more people away. The money, it's a math problem, and he doesn't have the answers to the math problem. 2 + 2 can't equal 100. And that's what he's trying to do. So with that, thank you very much.
Okay, folks, it's hot out here, so I'm going to wrap up. Yeah, that's my biggest round of applause so far. Get them off the stage. Well, my friends, as I said, a budget is more than just the sum of the numbers on the page. It represents the values of your city, of your leaders. It represents the future that you wish to see for yourself and your neighbors. So how do I know Chicago is not broke? Well, Navy Pier tore down an old Ferris wheel and built another one for $27 million. Barbara Byrd Bennett, the former CEO of schools, approved a sweetheart no-bid contract for $20 million after being bribed, and she's going to prison after being found out. The Belmont flyover for $570 million. That'll be a time saver for Lincoln Park yuppies like me, which will also demolish 16 properties. That's over $500 million for something nobody asked for. Also, Chicago police continue to shoot black people under suspicious circumstances, and the Chicago police and city council pays out millions and millions of dollars to the victims and their families. And as I pointed out, Chicago had $1.3 billion in property taxes sitting in TIF funds. And about $55 million of that is going to subsidize a Marriott's hotel down in the highly blighted South Loop Convention Center district. It's so blighted I can't even look at it. That's right. Well, the question is, if they're so corrupt, why should we trust them with revenues? Well, you know what? I believe in government. I believe in government can work for us. We just need a better government. We just need a new government. But the government idea is a good one. Now, Chicago continues to pay hundreds of millions to clouded law firms, banks, financial service outfits, and consultants. Hundreds of millions of dollars. Those are bad deals. You know, they're toxic deals. They're suspect deals. Deals that are done in bad faith and with a closed loop of insiders and self-dealers. So, maybe we should say, rather, that white Chicago is flush and not broke, but that poor Chicago, black Chicago, is broke and is getting broker. Now, my friends, there is money to pay proper and justified debts, but we need, as I said, a top-to-bottom review of our books to sort that out. And there is plenty of money in Chicago to run our city, so that it works for all of us, not just for the folks in the loop and the mayor's friends and his campaign contributors. So please, do not believe the narrative that says Chicago is broke. It's code for pay the players and screw the citizens. Thank you very much.
Provocative. You people now, I'm not going to conduct a Q&A with these guys. That is your job. That is your job. So feel free, ladies and gentlemen. That's what this free speech thing is all about. Address a question to either or both. We got about 5 minutes for that.
How about we create
there you go.
One of our biggest problems is decriminalize drugs and we tax them.
Okay, it sounded like the question is, what about decriminalizing drugs and legalizing them and taxing them? Okay, you got a thought on that? Sure. Oh, the answer is sure. Well, I agree. Yeah.
I think that brings in that much revenue. I don't think it brings in enough.
Well, it's like liquor.
Yeah, I say so. Yeah, legalize the drugs and tax them.
That's peanuts when you're trying to deal with $61 billion. But in general, I'm in favor of legalizing or decriminalizing drugs.
Hey John, I got a question for you. You told us how many companies left Illinois. My question for you is, why didn't you give us that amount of companies? Just so companies left, minus companies that have come in here. If you just given us the number of companies that have left, that seems like a misleading statistic. So my question for you is, how many companies moved back to Illinois in the same period?
They've lost jobs. So you've lost jobs. You know what? I don't have the one off.
You give us the gross number, not the net. What the heck? Why are you so misleading?
I was giving you one example of how, but what we know is we've lost 200,000 residents. We've had 80,000 people who have left the city of Illinois, or the city of Chicago.
All right.
That is, we have 80,000 people who have moved out.
Ask and answer. Another question there, sir. Who caused all this? The Democrats, he said?
If so, vote Republican.
Then if so, vote Republican, he says. All right, well, it raises a question of, do we need more than two parties? I mean, we only have one party in Chicago. Do we need a third party? I mean, it's a good question. Good question. We have a Green Party.
Libertarian Party.
Libertarians. All right, those are real parties. The Libertarians have a table right over there. Go find out more about them.
Green's over here.
Other questions? Step up, shout out. Right, front row.
No, we are not. We do not take any government funding whatsoever, and we do not contract with the city of Chicago. We are not the Heartland Alliance.
On the other hand, are
confusion of the two
very much into climate denial, climate change denial too.
How much construction will it not be, and how many jobs will be lost in construction and to the hotels where they hire people to operate them? Number two, how do you anticipate a progressive tax? There has to be a constitutional mechanism.
So, two questions from the gentleman. One, what happens if you get rid of TIFs? Will it not hurt the construction industry and the hotel trade, loss of jobs? And second, how does the progressive tax work? So, if you eliminate TIFs, you replace it with something bigger and better for Chicago's plan. Now, we do not have a plan for prosperity for everybody in the city of Chicago. We don't have a breathtaking vision for prosperity that doesn't only speak to the mayor's friends. That's what we need. So some people say, you know, go mass transit, bring the Red Line to Indiana, put a circle line around the city. These are massive projects that are worthy of a city and will be around for 100 years and create huge jobs and construction. So I'm for that. That's a good thing. But that's a conversation with the people of the city of Chicago. Where do you want to go? Because when the mayor says, I'm doing a project to make the city a world-class city, that's a sign to hold on to your wallet and run. Because they're going to give you another Olympics or another BS. So that's not what I'm talking about. So to get to what the brother's saying, replace the clout-driven, gumball machine TIF project with something breathtaking and substantive.
We built hotels before TIFs. We built industries before TIFs, right here in Chicago. TIFs aren't a silver bullet.
The gentleman says we do manage to build things without TIFs. Yeah, there is something called capitalism, where people do take risks and build them.
No, but
okay. Other question?
Yeah. You mentioned that revenue is not the problem, and then you talked about all these sources of revenue leaving. So if spending is the problem, what should they not be spending money on?
The revenue sources are not the problem. We have a lot of revenue sources which are driving away people with capital, with income, which once they leave, we no longer get anything from them. So when 3,000 millionaires leave the city, their money, their tax revenues that they were paying, we no longer get. Now we have high taxes. We've increased taxes to keep our revenues up. So while people were leaving, we're increasing taxes to try to cover those additional expenses. So that's the problem. And we're going to keep driving people away. You can only tax so much until people continue to leave.
There's a question there.
What do each of you think about term limits for the city council and mayor's office?
Term limits, term limits. You got a thought?
Sure.
He says sure. Well, yeah, I'm not against it, but you know, what happens when you get a good alderman like Wagasback or somebody else in there? Then, you know, then he's term limited. But yeah, I'm desperate for something, so I'll go for term limits for now.
Let me just say though, on that point though, about kind of so Democrats have obviously been in power in Chicago for a long, long time. So if you believe that there is a problem in Chicago, it is because of the Democrats. There are no Republican elected officials in Chicago currently. Now, I'm not going to say the Republicans would be any better. I myself am not a Republican. But you do have to look in the mirror and say, who am I voting for? Why am I voting for them if they keep driving up debt and keep doing the same thing every single year?
Good point. You get the government you deserve, folks. So, you know, we got an election in 3 years, so let's get busy.
Hey, do Republicans dumb down when they walk into the city? Is that it?
You gotta start working for them.
What about the pension?
Question.
What are you going to do about the debt that we have? Are you just not going to pay the pension? What are you going to do about that?
The question is, what about the pensions? No, the pension is to a government worker, a teacher. We owe them, we honor them. What I'm trying to raise is the issue is the debts that are mentioned here are suspect to me, and I want to investigate all of them. All of the commissions, including the guys that run the pension funds. Not that the pension to the teacher is not valid, but the way that the funds themselves are being run. We're paying $140 million in fees every year to the people who run the pension funds. So, as I say, a lot of insider trading, a lot of corruption, and what I would say inefficiencies need to be looked at in all manner of debt, whatever it is. I just am so disbelieving of the official pronouncements of the city and social media. Yes, sir.
Tom, I love you and I love your laughs, but I didn't hear how you're responding to John's argument that when enterprises leave, you leave again.
Job creators. You know, we got to take care of them, right? You know what? It's the public sector that makes the private sector possible. When you invest in the public, when you invest in public education, public transportation, public parks, that's what makes a city great. Not giving tax breaks to the billionaires that don't need it. So yes, invest in the public and you'll get a thriving private.
People created the government. Government did not create people and jobs, and they never do.
You've made a great case in your book for the South Big tax. And I'm just wondering why people don't realize that there are Nobel Prize winners that endorse 240 economists and financial traders, and that these factors have been used in other places in the world, and they have not moved, and they've raised billions of dollars.
The question is, if you read the book, you'll see a strong case made for the financial transaction tax. In this, about 20 jurisdictions off the top of my head, Singapore, London, many other places have the financial transaction tax at a higher rate than we're proposing, and those markets didn't melt down, they didn't run away, and billions of needed dollars are being raised to fund essential services in those places. Well, all we want is a conversation, for Christ's sakes. We just want to put these ideas on the table before Mayor Emanuel rams another $700 million of property taxes down your all's throats, which is what he did last year. There wasn't a murmur. There wasn't a conversation anywhere to talk about some of these ideas. So all we're asking it for is to put these ideas on the table in a substantive way so we can talk about it. Yes, sir.
There's 7 states in this country that have no income tax. Chicago also has the highest sales tax. And by the way, none of those 7 states owe a dime. They have no debt. Not one of them. That tells me that it's the public sector and all the corruption in government and in public services that is causing this big problem.
I agree with you. I mean, we've seen the largest growth. As I said, most of the people and the businesses that are leaving our state are for lower tax states, including Florida, which also doesn't have income tax, like Texas and other places. And you're exactly right. And these are not necessarily just the big, you know, we're not talking about big evil corporations. I'm talking about people who are starting a business. You know, Uber didn't become Uber overnight. Facebook didn't become Facebook overnight. It was entrepreneurs who invested their time and resources and create these businesses.
Well, you know, if you don't have to look far to a state that's cut taxes. Look at Kansas. They're in the shitter. They're in the shitter. So Brown back there has cut back taxes and they can't open schools. Whereas nearby Minnesota, they've raised the taxes and the state is flush. The state is doing well. Jobs are being created. The schools are sound. So, you know what? It takes money to run a great city. Now, the gentleman here has kind of caught me out. He's caught me out. Because on the one hand, I've been spending the last 30 years of my life fighting the Democratic machine. Right? And at the same time, I'm urging bigger government, all right? I'm urging more money for the public. That's what I'm saying. It's because, as I said before, I believe in government. I just don't like the governors of this place. They need to be replaced. That's how my answer to you, sir.
I got a question for you. Let's say you're right and this tax isn't large enough. How would you pay off our debts?
We need to restructure the debts themselves first. No. We need to figure out how to reform the pensions. Quite frankly, we need to give new employees the option of getting into defined contribution benefit plans, which gives
spin the wheel!
The flexibility.
Spin the wheel! Take a chance!
Why the pensions and not the bonds? Why the pensions and not the bonds?
There are public workers who don't work for government their entire career. There are people who work for 3, 5, 7 years and then go and maybe work for a different government or move to another state or go into the private sector. Those people lose their entire pension. So why don't we give people the flexibility? Not only will it give the worker the flexibility, but it will also force the government to put that money into your account so that you don't have to worry when you retire if it's going to be there, because you have control of it. You have the freedom to take your retirement where you go, rather than hoping, wishing, praying that the government is going to be solvent and be able to pay that bill in 30 years.
And you answer my question, what do you do with the existing debt, not new workers? How do you pay off our existing debt?
You got to raise retirement ages. You have to.
Yeah, it's always. The workers always have to pay. The banks never pay. The workers always have to pay. This is a sad song in the city. You don't have to go far. You don't have to go far to find millionaires and billionaires who are sucking up our resources and not paying their fair share. So it's kind of an issue, back to the point of what kind of city you want to live in. Or maybe I should ask it another way. Who is Chicago for? What is a city for? And it seems like Chicago has been turned into a machine to suck the resources from the many into the pockets of the few. That's what Chicago's turned into. It should be a machine for opportunity, where everybody gets a fair shake and the city works for everybody, everywhere, all the time. Okay, I think we're at the end of our time. I'm getting the high sign.
I want to thank you folks. I want to thank both of these guys, but I really want to thank you folks. I've been doing this for about 10 years, and that was one of the great, most engaged. You're not as crazy as you usually are. What's the matter with you people? An idea, though, if you want to continue this kind of dialogue, and I think it's really important to talk and yell and scream and argue with one another, the Old Town Ale House is one of my favorite places to do this. And the proprietor of the Old Town Ale House, Bruce Elliott, who remembers what went on in this park before these formal debates, is here. So if he's there when you go there, carry on. Fellas, thank you. Only $10. Only $10. Now it's time to spread around. There are